scientific knowledge. Here we have seen also an accumulated absolute number of patents that have been protected by these studies by companies and universities. So we have seen that in various areas in health, we have seen exponential growth in the beginning of the millennium, more recently, and in all cases we see a growth, especially in the area of therapeutical area that grows enormously. I'll see some examples that exist in the market that have been introduced by companies in the 80s. So it's a complex area, but also consolidated in terms of applications. You can also see that there are other areas that grow as well as food, cosmetic areas. I'm going to talk a bit about it. Referring to the particles, which ones would they be? There are a series of particles that have been developed, and here we will redefine nanotechnology. We will, as a plural concept, they are different particles with different applications. Here we have a number of articles that have been published that show different kinds of nanoparticles that have been studied, some with practical application. Liposomes are the first ones that has been used in human health in the 80s. They work with safe materials, and comparing with particles prepared with fullerenes, for example, we have degrees of risk. So we have to reinforce the difference between these particles, and say that we have the necessity to specify exactly what kind of particle we're talking about, and not only talking about nanotechnology as a generic term. Another thing I want to comment is the difference between a nanoscopic material and nanostructured material. In nature we have many material that is nanoscopic. Nanotechnology has another concept, that one of fabrication. I have to have a planning of the particle, its fabrication, and the control of the process of fabrication. That it has to be reproductive and robust. So they are different aspects, and we have to make these differences. I would like to also talk about pharmaceutical area and how where Brazil finds itself. I saw this historical. I made nano in its generic sense in 2000. The percentage of published articles and in French and in Brazil was in the 17th position with 1% of its production of scientific world production. Today they talk about BRIC, we talk about China. At that time it was with 1.4% of the world production. This was in the year 2000, and it after 10 years, 2010, have we evolved? Today we have a production of 1.6%, and this is not good, because in China they jumped to 16%. Before they had a leap much bigger than ours. So this can make us think a bit about investments in research in this area. I want to bring also other data that are concerning. In all times, we have seen how many Brazilian authors and researchers are producing in time. I've seen this through the magazines. There are 317 authors. Of these 317, 9 are responsible for 70% of the scientific production of Brazil. So if we look at the data through this analysis, we see that we have a long way to go. There aren't many people who are working in the area, considering the indexed production, and it still is concentrated within few people. Going back to the theoretical question, I'm going to talk about nanoparticles for drug delivery, for treatment, and this is the focus that together with other applications that were spoken of by other participants. And I'm going to talk about the part of delivery and drug administration. I'm going to bring an international data. Today, there are 263 pharmaceutical companies that are apt or already apply nanotechnology in some of their products. We see so this has been commented because nanotechnology can resuscitate drugs that had been placed in a second plan because there were problems of administration. This has already been commented. So today we have to bring back to the scenario, therapeutical scenario, these drugs that were abandoned because with nanotechnology they are of a lower cost than synthesize the new drugs. I would like to say that in the cosmetic area it was a pioneer area, the first products with nanotechnology, biodegradable. These first products were introduced in the 90s, and they became more sophisticated. And other sectors they benefit from this nanotechnology in the nanoscale. There is a potential of nanotechnology in the drug delivery system, and the sunscreens and cosmetics that are listed by the website of here in the area of the medications. Here we see that we have in the treatment of cancer, we have particles of 130 nanometers. There are products in the market comparing with the cosmetic area where there are much more products because the use is topic and the complexity to develop the product is much less complex than an injectable product. There are many already in the market. In the area of the human health, there is a research with metallic and inorganic particles, yes, but basically all these products are prepared with materials that are biodegradable and biocompatible, that bring safety and certainty to the administration. And from the 80s onwards, the first studies with biodegradable polymers were introduced, and there you could work with a degree of safety, a much bigger degree of safety. So the material is one of the factors that will determine the performance of the nanoparticle, together with other physical chemical characteristics. When we talk about human health, we talk about, for example, of injection, and another thing is a topic on the over the skin. So these things have to be differentiated, and the chemical composition and surface coatings. I'm not going to surface reactivity. We know which are the parameters that have to be studied to assess the impact that it will suffer. So all this issue of preparing the material, the size, the cargo, everything that will determine these materials that will interact with the biological systems. This is an area of importance. It will determine the toxicity up to the distribution of the particles in the organs. This is part of the steps of the development of nanoparticles. So we have to talk about polymers, biodegradable polymers, because they have the capacity of producing particles that are labile. They're not consistent. They degrade. In what do they they degrade? And degrade in harmless substances, for example, in lactic acid, for example, that would be eliminated and when it goes into the Krebs cycle. So we have to differentiate something when we talk about liposomes and like, for example, and another thing is talking about a nanomineral particle. So the human body has many doors of going in it, and so we pass through degrees of complexity. And what is the issue of the therapeutics? We have three challenges that follow each other. One is to find a site where the illness is happening, and to find a drug that will make the treatment, and to see in what way we can transport and deliver selectively the drug where it has to be delivered. So the strategies are varied with a complexity, different complexities. There was a conventional way. In the sequence, we had nanoparticles that are coated. These coatings will give a selection because it will direct this nano. And then when we can also have an active delivery, I will have something that is more closer to the concept of what is a intelligent particle. So today we have all behavior of how nanoparticles behave in a blood vessel, how they can surpass barriers, and we have a set of consistent data that makes us understand why some organs are waterproof and others no. So there is a physiological base that explains this distribution. So to make an outline, I brought two examples of our group of research. We have some examples of brain delivery and others of skin administration. That is a more safe example as talking about transference of technology in the company. So the blood-brain barrier is protected by the endothelial cells because then they block the movements of all the molecules. Every time that we have an illness that affects the brain tissue, we have a problem to access it because of this barrier. In the literature, we have evidence that nanoparticles can cross over this barrier. And here I will show you some data that we have. A melatonin that is a hormone that is very much studied for Alzheimer and Parkinson. It had a difficulty of crossing this cephalic barrier, and every time someone says that they have a nanotechnological product, you have to ask the quality control. And what is that? That is the size. And so you'll have to see that you will not have to have a summing of different sizes of particles. We studied in vivo and showing that in the cortex or in the hippocampus, and this was made in mice, and the antioxidant effect, what happened, this showed that more drugs reached the brain, and validating the idea that the particles entered the brain and determining the antioxidant effect. So this showed it to be a promising platform. Another one was the gliomas that are the most aggressive brain tumors. Practically all patients die after 1 year. And here we have a series of limitations, and they talk about the access for treatment. And so here we used a strategy that was a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory, and it induces peptosis. So we did not put in the capsule an anti-inflammatory in the steroid. We used ethylic ester to study the capacity of these substances, these nanocapsulated, which is promising. And it showed that associating different substances, we can have a synergic effect. Studies were made in the hippocampus, showing that these formulations are safe for normal cells, which is desirable. And finally, this study showed us we have a histological transversal cut in the brain of a mouse. Here we see the control that was treated with free substances, and here we see the nanocapsules. There was a reduction of almost not having more tumoral cells. This was published in the Cancer Letters magazine. So this issue of surpassing these barriers is overcoming these barriers. So, for example, the particles being able to make a selective delivery, and in skin-wise, there are also some advantages in which technology has accumulated, sustain and control the release of substances. This is the contrary of what sometimes we see in the internet, talking about nanotechnology as the capacity of penetrating comma depending on the type of particle and the material we're talking with. We're talking of particulars that are used in the human health. I'm talking about particles that are produced with biodegradable materials. So there is an increase of cutaneous adhesion. So there is a prolonged effect. I can, like, for example, apply it every 6 hours instead of every 2 hours. Here I'd like to show through the electronic microscopy. Here we have a conventional cosmetic and cosmetic treated with nanoparticles. Every time that we work with the skin, there is an assay that is fundamental. It is the study of the penetration of the skin, and this is they take pieces of human skin who had undergone abdominal plastic surgery to see what kind of penetration the nanoparticle can go. So this is part of the protocol, this kind of development. Here we see the polymeric nanocapsules. They do not pass to the interior of the skin. They remain on the epidermic layer. Here we have a tape stripping. We apply the product, and then we'll take away the layers to see where it reached. Here we also see the safety use. Another last example is the problem that we have in Brazil of dependency in raw material via importation for the fabrication of these particles. Here we studied the use of the cupuaçu butter for this fabrication of nanoparticles, and we called them thiospheres, a novel lipid nanoparticle, and Brazilian, and it showed to be very adequate. And finally, I'd like to show an example of a product that our research group promoted with a company. It is a photo protection with biodegradable nano capsule, and it passed through all the studies, and it is a photo protector that was launched last year. Here we can see the Brazilian nanotechnology in the Rio Grande do Sul University, where today the royalties are coming back systematically to this university, and this strengthens the system for post-graduation lessons, and it's a cycle. So we have many opportunities in Brazil for nanotechnology. And here I talk about to stimulate young scientists, and we have challenges. One of them are to analyze the issue in a science-based view. Here I saw this material of the risks of using nanotechnology because of the capacity of penetrating barriers. I saw this challenges, opportunities, risks, and ethics. So I think we have to be careful to see the impact of nanotechnology. We talked about how the theme of nanomedication and the Brazilian challenges. We have to have Brazilian raw material. Second, we have to have a big gap with the scaling of processes. We have how do we amplify a scale in Brazil? In nanotoxicology today, it is an area, new discipline that accompanies the new development of new products. There's a project that is dedicated to these studies that are parallel, and the regulation was already seen. Nanometrology, what references and parameters we have to define the nanometrology, and the social and ethical impacts. So this has to be improved. The capacity of the teacher to communicate making an exposition that has to be minimally comprehensive, and the change of paradigm in the commercial sector. Many times a person thinks that because I changed an object, they sometimes they criticize this. So here I've finished. Thank you, and I'm at your disposal for questions.